Hey everybody, it's Tom, and I'm coming to you this evening. I think the last time I came to you is a bit ago, and I talked about some of the philosophical texture of Jenga. How, even though on the surface it seems like a relatively simple, relatively straightforward game, when you start to get into it, when you start to appreciate its implications, you realize that it has a capacity to disclose all sorts of features of what it is to engage with human beings, what's your relationship with questions of risk, and so on. And on a sort of similar note, I thought I'd come to you this evening to talk about something else, namely puzzles, or specifically jigsaw puzzles. About, I don't know, 2.5 or so months ago, or maybe three, I don't know. On a whim, I purchased a larger, 1,000 some piece puzzle. And I had never done a really large puzzle before, uh, and I did it with my mom. And really, I was surprised by the depth of the experience. It was definitely more challenging than I had anticipated, and that along various radiating lines of consideration. For one thing, when you take a really large puzzle, of course, what constitutes a really large puzzle may be relative to the individual, but for me, it was 1,008 pieces, I think, and that was large enough to demand an exercise of the will, because inevitably, when a project comes to any scale, there will, I think, almost inevitably, when a project comes to any kind of scale, even a small project like putting together a puzzle, it will also have an element of friction that tests your commitment to its execution. And certainly that is the case with doing a large puzzle. And at moments, you really get a glimpse into issues of ennui and frustration, and one might even start to ask, why would you do that to yourself? Why would you sort of masochistically insert yourself into an enterprise that will bring up these sometimes less than pleasant emotions? And the answer, straightforwardly, is that it gives you an opportunity in a so-called low stakes situation to engage and work through those emotions. And that's certainly one facet of what I found actually tantalizing and pleasing about doing these larger puzzles. But there are other things going on with them as well. For one thing, what I found with remarkable consistency was that the piece for which I was looking would not look like how I excuse me. Excuse me. The piece right here. The piece for which I was looking would not look as I anticipated that it would be. It would have a different shade of coloring or shape or what have you, and it would always be a surprise when I put it there and it popped in there. All of a sudden, it fits seamlessly, and then there's an encounter of the aha, or of course, or why didn't I look at that piece earlier? But there is, and so what that does is it demands that you sort of expand your perceptual imagination and ways that can be in itself utterly stimulating. And right in step with that is a deepening of an appreciation of how the relationship between the part and the whole itself is somewhat enigmatic, right? And when we start to encounter the whole and different, so the whole itself has a complexion which affects and transforms its constituent parts. Then culturally, we have been, I'd say, pretty aggressively conditioned to think the other way around, that the small parts constitute the whole, and nothing like a large puzzle sort of exposes the limitation of that perspective. There's really an interplay between those terms, and they transform each other's aspect. So this is visually demonstrated powerfully by Jigsaw Puzzles. Now there's one other point which I thought I might mention, and this one might seem slightly on the woo-woo side, right? But there would be points where I would go to solve these puzzles, and I'd be looking for a piece, and I'd be looking for a piece. I couldn't find the bloody piece until I stopped looking for it, right? That's true of everything, right? But like your keys or what have you, right? But what's interesting about that phenomenon in this context is how it felt. It felt almost like I had to respect that the puzzle had a kind of autonomy. The mystery had a kind of autonomy, that it wasn't just going to give itself up to me in response to just a gross assertion of will. I almost had to relax and admit that perhaps the piece just wasn't ready to be found. And as soon as I took that tack, all of a sudden it would show up. It was like the puzzle would allow itself to be solved in its own time. Pardon me. So I think that might give us a window into our relationship with broader things in life itself, where maybe it's when we stop looking so aggressively to constitute, to arrive at, to assert a solution, that the solution will simply disclose itself to us of its own accord almost seamlessly. Mountain climbers talk about it too, right? When the alpinists will talk about how it's really not up to them altogether whether they can achieve the summit. There's a relationship between the climber and the mountain, and humility is necessary. A recognition that the mountain has to allow, in a way, for you to unlock it. It's not altogether in your hands. So, a very miniature example of that I found in doing large puzzles. So, that's another philosophical reflection, I suppose, today on the game, simple game, or it's not a game per se, but I think you grasp what I mean. And it's really interesting how all these little things can open windows to far larger ones. All right, well, there we go. I'm going to try and get back into doing these videos more often. Thank you guys for listening. I hope it was stimulating, and I will catch you anon. Bye.